Good morning, my friends from far away. A few months ago, I had decided to prepare some videos in English in order to widen my audience and to reach all my friends and all the people that I have known in English-speaking countries, particularly in Africa. Unfortunately, I've been very busy and especially busy with my weekly radio and video program in French, which made that I was unable to fulfill my commitment to produce some videos in English. I think the last one I did was in September. So today I've decided to start again with my English videos. And for some time now, I wanted to tell you about a stick, a walking stick. This one. You can see it has the shape of a snake. It's an African walking stick. I have kept this stick since the day it was given to me in 1989. That is 35 years ago. 1989 was the year when I had my first professional experience in Africa. Before that year, I worked mainly in Southeast Asia, mainly in Thailand, but also in Laos. And one day, WFP, the World Food Programme, offered me a job as a food aid monitor in Sudan. So, without being really prepared for that particular job, I landed in Khartoum and I had my first contact with Sub-Saharan Africa. After a few days in Khartoum, I was sent to Darfur, which was still peaceful there then, and in Darfur, in a place called El Dain, I joined a truck convoy carrying food to the south of the country, which is now independent as the Republic of South Sudan, but by then it was still part of Sudan. WFP was trying to ship some food relief to the displaced people displaced by war in South Sudan. And that's how I arrived in Wau after several weeks with the truck convoy from Darfur to Wau in Bahr el Ghazal, that is the southwest of South Sudan. Wau, by then, was controlled by the army of Sudan, of Khartoum. But all around, it was more or less SPLA area. The SPLA was a liberation movement fighting against what was seen as the northern domination and fighting the army of Khartoum. I will one day tell you the story of that trip on a truck from Darfur to Wau. That was epic. That's where I lost many kilograms and ended up very thin, which I am not anymore. Wau was flooded with displaced people coming from the countryside. They were living in terrible conditions in displaced camps in Wau. I will never forget the sight of those people who were literally starving. Mainly Dinka people. Only Dinka people, I would say. Dinka people fleeing the war areas, thinking that they would get food relief in town. I reached Wau in April, I think that was exactly 35 years ago. And one day, I attended, as often, I attended a lengthy meeting, or what was supposed to be a lengthy meeting, with the authorities and the other UN organizations and NGOs operating in Wau. We had regular meetings. I think, if I remember well, the government umbrella organization managing the relief activities was called RRC, Relief and Rehabilitation Committee. So early morning, because the meetings in Sudan at the time were always starting early because of the heat. Early morning, I went to that meeting, which was chaired by somebody acting as a governor, because there was on that day there was no governor. He had not been appointed or had been dismissed. I don't remember exactly, but on that particular day of June, it was on the 30th of June 1989, the meeting was chaired by somebody who was acting. So let me remind you that until that day, Sudan was under a kind of transition government chaired by Prime Minister Sadiq al-Mahdi in Khartoum. There was no president of Sudan. There was a presidential council made up of several politicians who were acting as a kind of collective presidential administration. But the power was supposed to be in the hands of Sadiq al-Mahdi, a famous Sudanese politician whose ancestor was a famous Mahdi who fought against General Gordon at the end of the 19th century. So maybe I'm going too fast, because before that meeting, I had been invited even earlier to have tea with the army general who was the commander of the Sudanese army in Wau. I think I went there at about 7 o'clock. He had invited me. I went there and he offered me tea, that Sudanese tea, very sweet. I think there is more sugar than tea in the glass, because the There they drink tea in a glass, not in a cup. And he took me around. It was, I forgot to mention that tea meeting was taking place at the military barracks. So he took me around, not the military barracks as such, but he was very proud to show me his carpentry. He had a carpentry. I was surprised to find a carpentry within the military barracks. So we visited the carpentry. They were making furniture, beds, armchairs, tables, and other things. Later on, I understood that was a kind of business, a side business for the military and for the general in particular. Because in Khartoum, there are no trees. In the south, there are plenty of trees. So the military had set up that carpentry, and when the C-130, those big planes from the Sudanese army were coming to Wau to bring military equipment, to bring ammunitions, to bring soldiers, they were not going back to Khartoum empty. They were carrying furniture. At the end of my time in Wau, actually, I flew back to Khartoum on one of those C-130s, which was full of furniture. And those furniture, of course, were sold there in Khartoum to the wealthy elite of Sudan. The general, an elderly person, well, he looked elderly to me at the time. I was 29, maybe he was about my age now. Was very friendly, and we had that glass of tea together. And at the end of our discussion, he offered me that stick, which had been made at his carpentry inside the military barracks. I thanked him, and I kept the stick. Of course, I was pleased with that nice gift, and I still have it. But why am I talking to you about that stick today? That stick which I have never forgotten, and which has always been at my place here in Bastia in Corsica. It's because after the tea, I went straight to the meeting with the local administration and the other organizations and NGOs. I was not very happy to go to that meeting because I knew those were lengthy meetings. After about 10 minutes, the chairman had just opened the meeting. A messenger came carrying what? Carrying a message, of course, on a piece of paper, which he left on the desk of the chairman. The chairman, who was talking, stopped talking and just opened the paper, and I saw that his face was changing actually. He stopped talking. He was obviously puzzled and didn't know what to do. And suddenly he said, well, I'll have to interrupt the meeting and postpone it. I have to go. So let's meet another time. And he left abruptly. We were all puzzled, wondering why that meeting had abruptly stopped. So I went back to the house where I was staying, and since I had nothing planned for that particular moment, since I had kept that morning for the meeting, I decided to switch on the radio. and I listened to the BBC. And that's how I learned that there had been a military coup in Khartoum, that a group of officers had seized power, and that Sadiq al-Mahdi was no longer prime minister and probably arrested. Later on, I heard about the name of the leader of the coup. It was an officer totally unknown by then called Omar Hassan al Bashir. Let me remind you the date. It was the 30th of June, 1989. This means that I had tea early morning with a general. He was something like what we would call a 4-star general. And obviously the general was unaware that a military coup had taken place in the capital city. Why? Because those officers who took power were more junior than him. Actually, Bashir, Omar Hassan al Bashir, was just a colonel who immediately promoted himself to the rank of brigadier general. All those officers were much more junior than the general I had met in the morning, the one who gave me the stick. The civilian administration was of course suspended, and immediately the general I had met in the morning became the acting governor of Bahr Ghazal for just a few days, because a few days later all the army generals who were more senior than the ones who had taken power in Khartoum were retired and replaced. That's why I have never forgotten that stick, which was given to me by a general who was retired by Omar Hassan al Bashir. Little did I know by then that Omar Hassan al Bashir would rule Sudan for so long. Actually, when I discussed with people, let me remind you that I was still very young. I was not a specialist of Africa, and I was not a specialist of Sudan, certainly. I had been in Sudan for just 2 or 3 months when the military coup took place. But all the more experienced people that I met, all the people who knew Sudan better, including Sudanese, of course, Northern Sudanese, South Sudanese, all told me, don't worry, there will be another coup soon, made by the senior officers, who will not accept to be ruled or to be overtaken by younger people and more junior people. I actually went to Khartoum to meet the WFP country director. His name was Peter Jobber, a very nice gentleman actually, to know what we were supposed to do with this new context and how we were supposed to deal with the military administration. And all the people I met in Khartoum all told me there will be another coup. This regime will not last long. Well, and that's why I wanted to end with, this regime lasted for 30 years. I'm very sad, actually, because now, as I'm talking to you, there is a terrible war taking place in Sudan between 2 generals fighting for power. And the Sudanese people is in a terrible situation. Many of them have fled to Chad, to South Sudan. which is quite an irony actually, because before it was the South Sudanese who were fleeing to the north, fleeing the war, and now it is the opposite. It's a forgotten conflict. There was a meeting a few days ago to decide what to do about Sudan, but the protagonists, the two generals fighting for power, were not invited, of course. It's very sad. It's a very sad situation. It is that particular situation which prompted me in recording that program today, and I wanted to show you my stick. I don't know what happened to the general who gave it to me. As I said, in 89 he was about 60, 65. So if he's still alive, he would be very old. And I don't even remember his name, actually. If one of my viewers, listeners, could tell me the name of the general who was the commander of the Sudanese army in war until mid-June 89, I would be very grateful, because I would like to associate a name to the stick. That's the story I wanted to tell you today. I hope you have been interested in hearing that personal story about the military coup of Omar Hassan al Bashir on the 30th of June 1989. And please, please, please subscribe to my channel. I promise I will do more English videos. But it's important for the visibility of HervéTV to have as many subscribers as possible. It's free, so please just click on subscribe, and if you have enjoyed this video, please click on like. Thank you, and see you next time. Bye.